What's going on? What's going on? Hmm. Is it the same as the auto in Grand Theft Auto San Andreas? Um, well, I can't quite answer that because of my lack of in detail knowledge. Because I believe they changed the auto a little bit between Grand Theft Auto Vice City and Grand Theft Auto San Andreas, right? So, um, and I'm not sure exactly the nuances of auto in each of those versions. So I can't really make the comparison to C++. Do you know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying? All right, that was just a cosmetic renaming of a variable. Wait a minute. Yeah, it didn't build. I was like, wait, I fixed that today, bro. It's because I didn't make the right compiler. All right, see, tonight, like, I kind of am in a mood where I want to quit programming forever. Not really, but it would just be so much easier to just sit around and play video games and stuff. Hey, Casey, you should get Remnant so we can go own monsters in a squad in Remnant. Um, so I'm in again one of these kind of not super high energy attack hard things moods. So I'm just going to chip away at stuff. Like I've got a list of things that obviously could be better and that mostly are small and tractable. Some of them, okay, one of the things that I really want to do this next week is really attack and clean up one of the few messy, gross, unrobust things left in the compiler. Well, there aren't that few, but there's fewer than there used to be. And one of them is the way static if works. And so I've been sort of chipping away at static if. I did some yesterday. Like I have ideas for how to re-implement it that would make it cleaner and nicer and possibly faster as well in terms of compile speed. But it's scary. Like, it's one of those things that is connected to a lot of stuff in the compiler. So the possibility of breaking things is always high whenever I edit it. But then that forces me to understand it. So did I like it? I liked it a lot better when I was playing it in full screen because it didn't miss the right mouse button clicks that I used to aim down the sight. Prior to that, it was a horrible disaster. After that, I would say I mostly had an okay time. I would go back and play it with other players at some point. There's still some things about the controls that are not good, but there's some interesting stuff about it. It seems to be designed for replayability pretty well. Like you re-roll the world and you get different monster variants and all that, and there's different bosses and different missions that didn't exist on your playthrough. There's some degree of replayability. Of course, as always happens, I'm sitting here working on my compiler and I'm like, man, I should go make the good version of that game because I totally know what it would be. But I just don't have time to do that. I have too many other things going on. Yeah, it's co-op. I think it's up to 3 players or maybe more. I've seen at least 3. How often do I work on smaller, unrelated games projects when I'm in the middle of developing something larger? I do that most of the time. Like, I always have more than one thing running ever since the year 2012 or something. However, I don't recommend that for most people because most people just have problems finishing what they're working on, their main thing in the first place. So you don't want to jeopardize that by adding another thing. For me, there's not that much question that I'm going to finish the things that I do because I've learned the secret of that. And the secret of that is you just do the stuff that you say you're going to do. It's really not hard, but most people don't do it, right? There is like some psychological transition that you have to make in order to be successful at that. But, if you haven't made that transition yet and proved it by shipping at least medium-sized stuff, I don't really recommend having a side project because otherwise it'll just be an excuse for you to stop the other thing. Yes, I did. I did complete the game. Is this a quality versus quantity kind of problem when it comes to making and shipping games? I think it's all quantity driven, right? Like people, well, it's both. It's both. I don't know. It's hard to make games, even for people who are good at it. Most people aren't that good at it because they're not that good at it. Or even if you are good at it, the mistakes you make it take longer. And decrease the quality, and decreased quality also takes longer. People think of it the other way around. They think that, making something better takes longer. That's true also, but there's like a saddle point where like if you fall below some level of quality, your development will take longer because just everything's a disaster, right? Making compiler is not the simplest possible way to program things, obviously. It's making a whole other language, which is the least simple way. Do you want to expound a little on knowing when to be simple and when to attempt something very not simple as a solution instead? What did I say the simplest possible way? Oh, you just mean, I don't think I said that a couple of minutes ago. Did I? I do often advocate doing things the simplest way. You can apply this question at all scales, right? Like, okay, so the last game we released was The Witness. That wasn't the simplest game to make, right? I could have simplified my life tremendously by making something simpler that probably also would have made a lot more money, right? I mean, the simplest thing at that point in time would have been Braid 2, right? And that would have made money. So there is, I mean, in general, the way that I do stuff is there are certain changes that I want to make or see in the world, right? And I try to do them in the most effective way. And so when it comes to programming, when I say do things in the simplest possible way, it's not necessarily because there's extreme virtue in simplicity. I think there is some virtue in simplicity, right? We all know that from Proverbs and things. But really the reason I say that is because I mean, I'm trying to figure out, because Casey asked this question, I'm trying to figure out the shortest answer. Like, I could go off on an hour rant here about how most programmers don't even know what they're doing and computer science isn't scientific. I know Casey probably at least generally agrees with most of what I would say, right? Like, most programmers believe what they believe about how to program is not really based on evidence in any way, right? It's just ideas that were communicated to them from other people on HackerDo's, right? So, and the observation that I have about that in the common case is that people are not being reality-based enough about what they're trying to do. And being reality-based in an engineering discipline means designing the thing that will solve the problem that you have, right? So what does designing the thing that would solve the problem that you have mean? It means, I mean, I almost don't know how to simplify it past that, but it means like, I mean, we all know that if you build a crazy Rube Goldberg machine that claims to solve a problem, or you do the direct thing that looks like it solves the problem, the direct thing is probably going to be simpler and more reliable and much faster to build and all these things. And so it's just to say that, like, almost all programming education is Rube Goldberg machines of some level or another. Some of it's good, but the aesthetic, let's not say education, let's say the aesthetic. The aesthetic of programming right now is very incorrect in the dimension of complexity versus simplicity, right? The aesthetic is, let's do this complicated thing because we can see how it builds a structure of how to program that we've been taught is exciting or interesting to think about. But if you really look at that structure very closely, it doesn't actually do anything with regard to solving the problem, right? In fact, it makes things worse sometimes, right? And I'm not just talking about something like object-orientedness. I'm talking about most things. Most paradigms of how to program are not reality-based in that sense, right? I mean, there may be more like mathematical ideas. I mean, I don't even mean like math, but like, oh, you should program in Python because blah, 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 right? It's like, if you're going to be like a mathematician and treat all potential combinations in space as being equally valuable, then that's an interesting thing to think about and whatever. But if you're an engineer who wants to solve problems, it's like, okay, wait, how does that actually apply to my problem? And not just in the moment, but like iterated over time and as you build up systems out of these things. And so it's just my advice, to get back to the point. I'm not explaining this very well at all, which is why I want to get back to the point. My advice towards simplicity is just because, I see all the time people not solving problems very well, and I see the reason why they don't solve the problems very well. It's because they become attached to some system of doing things that's overly complex and doesn't address the problem. So it's my attempt to shift programming culture in a direction that makes more sense and that's more effective, right? I wouldn't necessarily encourage people to do the simplest thing possible in the general sense, in terms of choosing what task to do, unless they're learning. Like if you're learning at the very beginning, it's good to do simple things. But when it comes to, like, most individual problems in programming are not that hard, and yet people spend months on them, right? And they end up with things that are way complicated, right? And there's this way that like programming is super linear, right? Like it's at least O n log n or O of n squared in terms of the way different things interact with each other. So if one piece is slightly more complex, then you get a super linear cost to that additional complexity, and that of course grows as those constants grow. I mean, one example of this that people were talking about, it came up on the Frequent Flyer Elite Lounge Discord channel. Someone posted a link to somebody's entity component system, right? I rant about entity component systems all the time. I say, your game doesn't need one of those, right? As I always say, it makes sense if your job is to write an engine that you don't know how people are going to use it, right? Then you try to make this flexible thing. But if you're an independent developer and you know what game you want to make, just type the code for those entities, right? Like don't do a frou-frou component system because it's complexity that you don't need. Just one example of when I see people going out of their way doing stuff. Anyway, so I didn't even follow the link, or no, I did to the front page. I didn't read it up much about it, but somebody linked to a efficient multi-threaded entity component system that somebody like released on GitHub as their library, right? And I didn't even feel the need to read it because I just know it's not good. It's not the right thing. Why? Because there's this whole idea, like, I'm going to make this component library. I'm going to make this library for threaded entity component systems. And that usefully solves a job of having threaded entity component systems. And then you'll come along and you'll build the rest of your game around that. And that'll be great. And that is never the approach that works, right? That's the approach that gave us direct show and shit like that, right? It's never good, right? What's good is you say, I have a particular problem. How do I solve it, right? What are the steps I can go to solve it, right? So if somebody made a game engine and it was high performance and it did a lot of good stuff and it shipped for real in multiple places and it was built around a threaded entity component system, then I would have more belief that that was valuable. It's still only valuable to people who buy into that whole engine, right? But that's the other thing I was trying to explain on the channel is like, look, it's super misguided to even start with that because come on, a modern game, okay, what do? You read input, you simulate the game state, and you render, okay? Those are in order that they should happen in frame. They're also in order of how much they cost. Reading input is very cheap. Simulating your game world is, for most games, pretty cheap if you write the code well, right? Rendering is hella expensive. So having your game be high performance is almost always going to be based on rendering. You might say, well, what if I have bazillions of entities? Won't it take a lot of time to simulate those? And it's like, sure, it'll also take a lot of time to render them unless your graphics are really shitty, right? So, so the rendering is always going to dominate. And just like everything else, we have no allergy to complexity. So the graphic systems you have to deal with are heinously complicated, right? Which means the code is really complicated. It has to get even more complicated to be fast. And so if you're building a game engine for a modern game, almost all of the effort goes into rendering. And that sucks and it's stupid, but it's true. That's just what it is, right? And tasks related to rendering, like how do we, load the assets and put them together on disk and compress them and all that, right? So because that's your problem, you want the structure of the engine to solve that problem, right? So if you have entities and some paradigm for how you call updates on the entities, you want the rest of the engine to dictate what that structure needs to be, because the rest of the engine is the part that's hard and complicated, right? And it needs all the help it can get in terms of being structured the way that it needs to be structured. You don't want to make it complicated because you have some weird idea about how entities should be. Entities is just calling some functions that do some code. That's been the same since like 1950, right? So starting with this idea, here's this threaded entity component system that's this beautiful package and you can use it and build your game around, it's completely wrong, because you have to shape all your things to plug into that. And that's not solving the problem that you have, right? So that's all. So what, if I could say in one phrase, what I think is our problem is we're not allergic to complexity as programmers, right? So programming culture is broken on a global scale, right? Cultures evolve over time, and more successful variants of a culture outcompete the less successful ones and spread better and all that stuff, right? Programming culture is new, and especially it's been growing explosively, right? And so there's been no selection pressure on it. And so it's super broken right now because anybody can believe whatever they want and there's no penalty, basically. There are mild penalties. Actually, the penalties for believing social things that are wrong-think for the group that you're in are way, way steeper than the penalties for believing incorrect technical things, like facts that are not true about the world in the technical sense. So in that sense, there's kind of negative selection pressure, sort of, because if you're in industry, you're encouraged to be getting social decisions right and not engineering decisions, right? So that's super bad. Anyway, we just haven't, so because there hasn't been selection pressure on programming culture, whether or not you believe me about whether the current culture is right or not, you could at least expect that there's not that much reason for it to be right. There's like a very mild constraint that your program does kind of have to run, and that's a reality check, but that's getting looser all the time anyway. Like, look at how many more and more programmers are hired just to make a simple program run now, right? Like people spend years at web companies working on individual web pages that are about the complexity of something I would program in BASIC when I was in high school in like a couple weeks or a week or something, right? It's just crazy at this point. So there's no pressure encouraging engineering or software engineering culture to converge on values that actually make sense and are true, right? And so I claim, and there's some values that I believe that are more particular to me, and there are some that are more universal, right? Some that are more particular to me is I think it's stupid if you're wasting 99.99999% of your computer, which is probably not an exaggeration for most web software, for example. I think that's silly. Some people will say, well, whatever, it doesn't matter. The computer is really fast, right? But complexity kills everybody, right? It makes everything more complicated. It makes users unhappy in multiple dimensions because they have to deal with more complex things, and because the things work less well. It lowers the threshold of what we could even accomplish, right? All these things. So that's why, like, I think that if we do end up with some pressure back on the industry that pushes us toward some actual values that can be empirically verified in the universe, the benefit of simplicity will be one of the least controversial ones in the long run. In the short run, it'll still be controversial because all these people get paid to tell you to make things complicated, right? In the long run, no. I don't know. I feel like I've been very rambly, but not to discredit the point, but to follow up on what Binkara said earlier, this is all very easy to say when you've been programming for 30 years and not so easy when you're still learning and exploring and experimenting. Oh, I know. Well, okay, here's the thing. I feel bad for people who are learning in the modern environment because it's so screwed up. Okay, here's how I learned to program, all right? Up through about the 5th grade, I would go to grade school. I was not very happy in school, but I was like excited about math. I really liked math class and whatever. And then, up through 6th grade. And then in 6th grade, I think, we had our first computer class and I just loved it, right? And it was I don't even remember that much of what we did in the computer class because it was really elementary. It was Commodore VIC-20s and they all shared one floppy disk drive. So at the beginning and the end of the class, the teacher had to go push one. It's like a bunch of physical toggle buttons, and push one to connect computer 1 to the floppy drive, and then you could load your program. And then push 2 to connect computer 2 to the floppy drive, and you could load your. So a lot of the class time was wasted on that, right? But it was very straightforward. It was like you type these commands in the basic programming language, and then these things happen, right? It was a very simple, here's cause and effect, right? It was very not dogmatic, let's say. It was very not ideological. Then my parents saw how much I was into computers and they bought a computer for home, and I was just glued to that thing every night after school for like years, right? And the first, when you bought a book or when you bought a computer at Radio Shack, right? That was the store they knew where to get a computer. They got a TRS-80 color computer, which was a pretty good computer. It wasn't as popular as the Commodore 64, but it was nice. And they had little books there about how to program the TRS-80 color computer. And those were great. You could blow through them at your own pace. And they were also very straightforward. Here's a command. Here's what it does. Here's an example of what you might do with it, right? Here's an exercise on how to expand your ability of what you might be able to do. And I just plowed through those. And at the end of those, I knew how to program. I mean, up to the standards of the day, not compared to today, right? But like I could write non-trivial programs on a home computer, that were exciting and interesting and all that. And there was no BS involved in any of that. And it was very direct. And you even toward the end of those books started learning some actual, because you're in basic most of the time, but eventually it's like, hey, there's some registers that you can poke to control things like, how the video chip picks which colors should be up or whatever, right? And so you start learning how the machine actually works. So all that stuff was really great, and it's just not like that now. And so I feel bad for people who want to learn to program because everything that's being shown to them sucks. Like, it's all terrible. It wasn't terrible when I was learning, right? There was a lot of stuff that was less convenient. Programming in BASIC without a text editor was not that convenient, but there also was a way in which it wasn't crappy in the modern way that everything is crappy. Yeah, I don't know. I feel bad for people learning today because they don't have good examples. And that's one reason why I rant, because people need good examples, or else they're just going to think this is what programming is. And that's pretty bad, right? It also always felt like you were using software made by people who were really good at what they did. Yeah, that is true. Again, if you didn't, like on home computers in the 80s, most programs that you could run on those computers, you felt like the author knew what the hell was going on, right? That is true, and it's a feeling that doesn't exist anymore, hardly. Any plans with the new language to ease development on the GPU side? Not directly, because there are some things that are a little bit indirect, right? So because, for example, our language is so good at communicating with the outside world because of the metaprogramming facilities and the full provision of the type information and all that, then it might be possible. So, again, as I've alluded to on several occasions, the current graphics programming situation is beyond stupid now, right? Like you have to write your shader program in a different programming language, even for the same hardware if you just swap out the operating system, right? It's insane. Like nobody in the 1960s and 70s was that dumb, but we've let it happen, right? Because for performance reasons, that trend is getting worse over time. So the percentage of your program represented by the shaders used to be small, but it's getting bigger and bigger because you've got to put all this stuff in your shaders, right? So once upon a time, actually the particle system for the Sokoban game still is kind of largely in software where it rolls random numbers for all the particles and stuff, and then does some procedural code to figure out what should happen, and then tells the shader what it needs to do to draw the particles. But if you want the highest performance on that, then most of your particle system code is in the shader now, right? Which means most of your particle system code has to be in a different programming language on every single platform that you ship on, which is insane, right? And it's not just particles, it's like large parts of your rendering. So we really want to fight back against that trend. Now, what we did on The Witness and what a number of people are doing is you just pick one of those languages and then you like cross-compile your shaders into the other languages, which I think is okay, but it's a little bit weird because sometimes there's things that you can't express in various places, right? So I'm thinking that since we have very good communication between your program and the outside world, your metaprogram can see everything and control what happens. It may be quite feasible to like write your shader in this language, possibly using a bunch of macros and stuff, and just retarget that as part of your normal compilation to whatever you want, either to software or to metal or to HLSL or GLSL or Vulkan, whatever, right? That would be nice. That's something that we've talked about. It's just there's been too much. We've talked about doing it for this game, in fact. There's just been too much on our plates in the near future. But that's the closest thing that I could say that's language oriented. Like really just dealing with graphics is mostly up to your application. But there are maybe some things we could do to help. Yeah, especially in saying that it requires 2 different programming languages on 2 different OSs to program the same GPU. Yes, exactly the same hardware. Like you could literally, okay, take the GPU out of one machine, plug it into the other machine. Now you have to use a different programming language to tell it what to do. It is fucking stupid. I cannot mince words on that. It's one of the dumbest things. Like, I don't understand how anybody can look around and see that and think that programming is great today, that it's like all on track and software is better than ever. It's insane, dude. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, as someone brought up in the chat too, we're getting toward the point, right? I linked this thing on Twitter where Dropbox sort of gave up trying to ship the same code on Android and iOS, right? I mean, part of that is just Dropbox being bad at engineering, I think, because most of what they said were just problems with being bad at engineering. But I think it's clear that that's actually the desired result that both of those platform holders want, right? They each want to lock you into their platform and off the other platform, and they have no real incentive to go the other direction. So they're just going to, I think, increasingly push it so that you need to use a different language for each platform, right? So that's, as I said in the Twitter thread, that is a regression of technology, okay? It's a loss of capability. Like starting in, in the days of Fortran and COBOL, which is a long time ago, you could program vastly different systems with the same programming language. The programming languages often had minor variants, just like different C or C++ compilers have different minor variants today. But as long as you kept those in mind, you were fine. And if you got surprised by a new one, you could make some hopefully small changes to your program and all is good, right? So we're talking about regressing to pre-1960s technology, or maybe 50s. Like, I don't even remember when COBOL started, okay? Like, again, I'm not going to mince words on that. That is what that is. In terms of the technology of software development, right? This is what I was trying to explain. I did that speech in Russia where I said that software technology is not improving. A lot of people didn't seem to understand what software technology is. And I kind of don't blame them because nobody has examples because software technology hasn't actually improved. So you don't have examples of it improving, right? But it's actually degrading, right? We're losing the capability to ship something in multiple places that has the same source code. That's crazy. And it's not like there's a good reason for that. You could imagine a really good reason for that. Like, wow, this other device is so alien and different. It's like this other thing is a probabilistic, analog device. It doesn't even, like, linear sequences of instructions don't totally make sense. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about 2 different things that look exactly like this, just with slightly different shape of case, right? And then where the buttons are. Okay? And then if you have one slightly different shape of case, you have to use one programming language. And if you have another slightly different shape of case, you have to use the other programming language. It is fucking stupid that we are allowing this to happen. And Yeah, it's a technological regression. I can't be more clear about that. I don't know what else to say. Started with a Tandy Coco 3 from Radio Shack, but mostly played a game called Thexter and cried about not being able to type in the game code fast enough. Well, you should have had the same books I did, man. The reason is financial incentive for giant hardware companies. Maybe, but it doesn't matter what the reason is, right? Okay, here's the thing. This is what I'm saying about okay, imagine this is going to be a highly fantastical scenario, but just imagine we discover there's a shadow Earth on the other side of the sun that's been there all the time. And they have exactly the same level of civilizational development as us, right? But it's 10 years from now, and we've allowed our software development to get totally fragmented and effed up, and you have to write in 37 different programming languages to ship a thing on your phone, and 37 other different programming languages to ship a thing on your other phone with a slightly different case with slightly different buttons, right? And of course, it mostly runs off the web server. Your application, your front-end application uses 28 of those 37 languages and doesn't do very much, right? It's just waiting on the cloud all the time. And then we get in touch with Shadow Earth, and they did it differently. They decided to treat software engineering like you would treat structural engineering, like people who build bridges or whatever, and actually evaluate it based on the results and analogs of things like strength of materials or whatever. And they could actually still do what we were able to do in the 1970s, which is write one program in one language and use it in multiple places. And then suddenly we find ourselves in economic competition with those guys. We're going to get destroyed. We're going to get frickin' destroyed because our entire economy is based on this massive, bloated, inefficient, crazy thing. All right? So, yeah, I don't know, man. Do I think Risk V can help? Dude, I don't know anything about Risk V. Probably not. Like, look, the basic problem is, again, as I said, engineering culture has incorrect aesthetics right now. It has, or not global engineering culture, but software engineering culture for sure. I don't know much about other engineering cultures, but software engineering culture has mostly flawed aesthetics, and those have to get fixed. If those aesthetics get fixed, you don't have to ask about a particular thing like Risk V. Like, look, dude, there are so many programmers right now. We should be cranking out awesome stuff at such a fast rate. Like, if you look at how much software, how much new and interesting software appeared in like the 1980s, right? When I don't even know what the size of programming teams or global number of programmers was back then, but it's like, was it 1/1000th of today? Was it 1/10,000th of today? I don't even know, right? We should have 1,000 times the rate of interesting software generation that we had in the 80s. All right? We do not have that. I'm not even sure we have 1 times the rate of interesting software generation that we had in the 1980s. Why? That's what's broken. All right? If we fix that, it doesn't matter what particular thing you think of, because we'll be making good things that address the actual problems that we have. Right now, we're not doing that. So it doesn't, ignore any specific thing, right? Ignore even like this, hey, I'm working hard making this compiler for this new programming language. the largest impact that that can have is actually cultural, right? It's so I hope that it is a good engineering tool that people can use that will provide them an alternative to something like C++ and save a lot of time and suffering. All that is true. That's the reason why I made it, right? But the cultural deficit is the reason why we didn't already have this thing that I'm working on 20 years ago, all right? That's the important thing to fix. If we fix that, we have 50 things as good as this language that I'm working on, right? So the main value behind this compiler actually is as an existence proof. Like, look, you can do this thing. You can do a programming language that is not bullshit and doesn't suck and compiles very fast and lets you write software that is very fast, right? That is the primary value of it, probably. I am realizing lately. I don't know how much of an impact will that actually make. I don't know, because people are endlessly motivated to believe their own BS, right? So maybe even as a clear, easily demonstrated existence proof, it wouldn't make that much of an impact, but hopefully it'll make some and convince some people, like provide an example to some people like, oh yeah, you can actually program the actual computer that you're running on, and it's not that actually hard to do, you know? So that's the plan. Yeah, I don't know. How do we work toward a better culture? Good question. Actually, the unspoken truth is that all science and engineering is stagnating by the numbers. Nobody actually knows why. Yeah, I in general believe that. It's just that I am not an expert in other domains. So I will let people from those domains speak for those domains. But I do know some things about programming. So I feel qualified to speak about programming. Could I have made this if Zachtronics games didn't exist? Yeah, I don't understand that question. I like Zachtronics games, but I don't understand what that has to do with anything. It really is not just software engineering that is broken right now. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think yeah. It looks that way to me as well, but who knows? Feels like the software complexity thing is almost an aspect of the nature of computation, e.g. DNA is a mess of spaghetti code. Whatever works flies, even if it's abstractions on others' abstractions. Okay, actually, I heard something interesting the other day on a podcast about that. Like many biological mechanisms in the human body, for example, in most creatures, are crazy complicated. They're like not what you would design to do that thing, right? And they're more inefficient usually than the thing that you would design. But the interesting theory that was brought up on this podcast was that all that overcomplication is an evolutionary defense mechanism against parasites that hijack your behavior, right? Because the simpler a system is, the easier it is for a parasite to make it do what it wants to do. But if the system of of signals and responses and like protocols to do a basic thing is just crazy complicated, then you need a crazy amount of complication to drive it, right? Which means that it would be very hard for parasites to evolve to be able to do that in most cases, right? So that was interesting because I was like, oh, that actually makes sense. It takes something that people take for granted and actually makes it make more sense, right? Because let's face it, it's been, that whole thing about like mechanisms in biology being super inefficient because they're not designed and that's just what happens. It's like, wait, really? Doesn't evolution also say though that if it becomes more efficient, that you just have like a less complex system has fewer failure modes, so you'd have more survivability, so there should be evolutionary pressure in that direction. So there should be pressure in biology, if we don't consider this parasite thing, for systems to be optimized and simple actually. So like, why aren't they, right? Is part of it that software is more of a hidden thing, like it's obvious not to build bridges from graham crackers and no one would drive on them? Is this a property of software? Do you foresee a time when software gets to a point where people don't drive on it anymore? I don't know. I mean, yeah, I think it's maybe just when the bridge falls down, people don't die. Usually. I mean, they do sometimes. I don't know. I don't know, man. What was the podcast? I don't remember. Was it? Let me look at my podcasts. Oh, it was on Sam Harris's podcast. I haven't listened to the whole episode yet, so maybe it ends up sucking, but yeah. Just like why Silicon Valley code sucks, it requires some kind of resource scarcity before natural selection actually selects for efficiency. Maybe, but I'm thinking of things like failure modes or whatever. Like if you have 7 steps, there's just more chances for failure than if you have 3 steps, right? I don't know. Did I watch any of the International this year? Yes. I watched several different matches of blurry alpha blended guys surrounded by magic particles running around. Like, dude, the fact that they made this art decision that we're going to make all the characters look cool by having them constantly have magic particles on them at all time to begin with, not even just when they're casting spells that mean anything, but just all the time. All the characters have that. It's like unreadable, dude. It's unreadable. You have to pay money for a lot of those magic particles? Maybe. Okay. How about if I do some actual work? I've got a little spot on my screen that I'm gonna clean off. I wish I could get more done. I wish I had fewer side projects or that they were done and more time to make games and a lot more money to make games with and a large established company where I could just farm out projects because I'd have like 8 good games going right now. It's very sad that I can't do that. All right. So I'm going to look down my list of things that are not that hard to do. Okay, well, here's one. We have this struct called a queued, which is sort of how we do the nonlinear compilation. And because I was being paranoid in the beginning, those are just heap allocated. I just say new and use the C++ default new. Oh, there we go. These are queues, arrays of queues. Most things in the compiler don't use that, but this just always did because I didn't care that much. But it's like 50,000 allocations for when compiling Sokoban, so it's probably worth just doing. Now I realize that's nothing. That's like what happens when you press one keystroke in the Chrome URL window, but we might as well do it. All right. So the point where this happens is just here, and well, I think I have a thread local. Actually, I've got some macros that I could use, like get memory. This is interesting because these take critical sections. Most newing of things happens in the parser, which doesn't get critical sections. So at some point, we maybe want to go through and get rid of the critical sections on these. Or really, probably the best way to do it is to just treat these as legacy and just leave them around, rename them to like legacy. And then as, like, okay, so the backstory behind all this is like, hey, when we're getting the compiler off the ground, let's do something reasonably fast, like have a pool allocator. You could use it anywhere, whatever, right? Okay, but if you want to multi-thread things and have them be fast, the number one rule of having threaded code be fast is to avoid synchronization, right? Waiting for things on other threads to happen. Memory allocation, so for example, if you just say malloc or new or whatever all over your program, well, in most implementations, in fact, I think in all implementations, that is a globally synchronized allocation, right? Where it'll take a critical section and do some memory allocation. They might, you know, somebody's implementation might try to do something where they have some number of allocation service ports where they try to switch between, I don't know, but I could almost guarantee you that Visual C++'s C runtime doesn't try that hard. The reason, I mean, you might think, well, they could be thread local heaps, but they can't because in C and C++, nobody says you can't malloc something in one thread and free it in another thread. So, yeah. But I have specific thread local, well, interp here is actually thread local. So interp pool is thread local. Unfortunately, I can't say get without mutex on this because there are other people using this and these might happen in like the side threads somewhere. which sucks. So the only thing that's cleared right now for a non-critical section allocation is the parser, and the lexer. Fortunately, the parser allocates the vast majority of things in the program, so it's not that bad. Is that really true? It's at least half. It's at least half the things in the program, probably more. Yeah. So, what do I want to do about this? I am just going to use the critical section version of pool, and that'll naturally have its incidence of use decreased over time as things get segmented off. Anyway, though, so it's a little bit of a waste because there's almost no contention on this. Like, the only thing is, because most of this is just called from the main thread of this particular interp, right? I need to audit the program to make sure that nobody in a side thread is using it. And then the scary part is it's maybe easy to regress accidentally and introduce a bug that way. So I need to think about what's the best way to prevent that. Like, maybe the best way is to explicitly name all these macros, like get memory from main thread pool, right? And then I could have an assertion in there for debug builds that looks at the thread ID and makes sure that that it's equal to the interp's main thread. I think that's the main thing that I can actually do. Because the thing is, naming it the right thing doesn't help that much. Because, like, you've got code called by code called by code that I'm not sure where it comes from. And, you know, we've made several implementation decision changes over time. And whatever. How do I say that better? It's not that I'm not sure where it comes from. It's that there's just a lot of things happening, and keeping it all in my head and seeing very clearly, like, oh, this thing that's using this particular memory pool is only called from blah, blah, blah. Like, C++ doesn't help you with that at all. And so to be very clear about that, you just have to, like, remember it all, which is not practical. You have to have better memory than me to do that. How performant is getting a thread local? It's not slow. Why not make a thread local general purpose pool? That's a possibility. In fact, I had thought that I had one, but maybe I don't. I have them for data structures. So like when I make an array, an automatically expanding array. I don't set allocators on those, and those just use this thread local array pool to get utility memory from. I could make another one. Or, I mean, I could just put it on interp and I could just make it a different pool. That would be fine. And then I could get it without the critical section. I still don't know exactly how much critical sections cost in Windows. Like, the problem is if you search for that, the answer is probably from someone who's a bozo. Of course, I got a useless search result when I searched for that. I don't know. Documentation doesn't say. They are fairly fast for low contention. I don't know what fairly fast means. What does that mean? What is fairly fast compared to what? A couple of instructions. I don't think I believe that because you have to call enter critical section. That's more than calling a procedure is more than a couple of instructions. I mean, unless you're telling me that gets inlined, which I don't think I believe. The actual logic part, it's an atomic set test set thing. So like, the thing that I'm always confused about is if you're gonna leave the critical section, right? Even if it wasn't contended, you have to wake somebody else up if they decided to sleep on it while you were in it, right? And so the question is, how does that happen? I'm having trouble picturing a way with like an atomic set that you could cause somebody to be woke up unless there was like a totally different, like kernel is watching has an interrupt telling it to look at that memory location or something. Like, I don't know. The other thread spins for a bit before going to sleep. Right, but what if it goes to sleep? You still have to wake it up, right? But I guess... No, but I mean, it goes to a hash map. I don't care about that. I'm saying, okay, to wake up a thread, you probably need to go to the kernel, right? So... how do you know that you don't need to do that? So under low contention, you don't actually need to wake anybody up, right? How do you know that you don't need to wake anybody up? It uses a counter. How does it use a counter? This is exactly, okay, no, this is exactly the kind of answer that I'm saying is a garbage answer. I mean, it's a partial answer. Look. Before going into the kernel, it uses interlocked increment, and if it succeeds, then it considers the lock acquired. That's fine. I'm saying when you wake up, or when you leave the critical section, that's the part that's expensive, not entering it. This guy doesn't even know that when he answered the question. So he's just saying something he heard from somewhere else. This is exactly what's wrong with programming culture, right? This guy doesn't have the first-hand knowledge because he doesn't know what the issues are. He's just saying what he heard somewhere else. The other performs a cast to add a sleeper. Trying to picture how that would work. So I look there, I do a cast with 0 on whatever member of the critical section struct. I get back 0. So I'm like, oh, cool. Nobody was sleeping. Then I exit. I guess that works. I guess that works. I mean, the weird thing about it is there's a little bit, there's a danger of a race because you get back 0. And right when you get back that 0, maybe the very next cycle I mean, it would have to be a 16 byte cast, right? Because you need like 1 to add the sleeper or check for the sleeper, but you need 1 to signal whether or not the mutex is held, and they have to happen at the same time. So maybe it's a comp exchange 16B, but I believe critical sections were claimed to be fast long before comp exchange 16B. Like, dude, I'm pretty sure the claim that critical sections are really fast, like, goes back to 2002 or something. So, I don't know. I seriously don't know. It uses the lower byte for an occupancy flag thing and the upper 24 bits for the sleeper count. Okay. Okay, right. I guess you don't need the actual pointer to the sleeper as long as you know that there is one. Then you call into the kernel. I mean, I could imagine it getting really messy, but maybe it is messy, but maybe it works. Okay. Anyway. Let's just make a separate pool so we don't even have to worry about the function call overhead or anything. was that thing? Pipes, that's a weird place for it. Okay, so here we're going to say I'm probably going to get rid of the constructor on this as well. All right, memory, let's just say cube, cool, get without mutex size of cubed. Okay. Oops. Okay. Let's get rid of this. That's stupid. Okay. Okay. Did I save all my files? All right. I hit the wrong key again. It's like Control B. Pineless uses NT keyed events, so it doesn't need pointers. It uses the address of the mutex as the key. All right. Well, that's good. It's good to hear from somebody who sounds like they actually know what they're talking about how that works. Not usually my experience. Wait. Oh, yeah, because we got rid of the constructor. Oh, no. Okay, this is... We need to get rid of that at some point. This is one of the ugly things. Ugh. I will leave that for now. Wait, how many times do I frickin' do that? Oh, force infer struct. Yeah, this force infer struct is bad news. Or force infer, anything in the compiler that says force infer. No good. All right, you know what? I got to back out the thing that I did. Let's do this. except because of order of declaration, I can't. Oh my God, I hate C++. All right, we're just going to do this again. Put it right here. You're amused that almost every file I open has a hack or cleanup. It's because I'm honest. Most programmers are not honest. Or have very low standards. Dude, like the things that I have labeled as hack or cleanup, a lot of programmers would think was the best code they wrote that year. Okay. Okay. Well, that was stupid. And we crash for some reason. Great. I don't seem to have to init my pools. What's going on? What did I mess up? What? That's a very strange way to exhibit. A bug? Did I delete something else in that constructor? Nope, it was just that. Just that. Okay, wait. Let's just see if that is the cause of the problem. It seems very weird. Like that bug didn't look like something that should be a result of that. But if you mess up memory things, then no, it's totally not. What's going on, dude? Okay, do I just scorched earth? Oh, whoops. That'll do it, probably. I forgot about that. Nope, still not it. What is happening, dude? Today, things have been like this. It's been like I change a small thing and... All right, you know what? Watch me revert and it's still broken. It says build passing from the one I checked in at the start of the stream. Or not the start, but a while ago. All right. What the hell is going on? I have no idea. Let's do it again. One step at a time. It might even be just like a Visual Studio problem. Like I added a member to interp, right? And that's scary. Because Visual Studio, I should have done a clean build. I didn't because it was behaving the same in debug and release build. But like often Visual Studio will just get struct sizes wrong. It's still doing it with a completely reverted source. Now I have no idea what's going on. Literally none. Because like stuff was working. Does Sokoban modified? No. What is happening? Okay. Well, it's macro related. Not that surprising, macro system's new. The following import links. What? How did that happen? We have a declaration with no enclosing scope. It's an iterator variable. Generated by the copier. Well, let's just start debugging this. I don't really know what's going on. I was doing some declaration stuff at the start of the stream, but I don't think I deleted anything real. Ah, the slowness of data breakpoints. Or conditional breakpoints, actually. Well, that didn't catch it. Wait, it's got a different number now. Oh boy. Now we have real problems. When you have a non-reproducing, this hasn't happened to me in a long time. Did Casey hack my computer? Was his asking me questions just a front for him to distract me while he hacked my computer to introduce weird stuff to make me go crazy? Okay, like seriously. I am very, very confused because like we were working fine. It's clean. I don't think this is going to help. I think I just did that, but like, did I do something in the previous? Cosmetic renaming. It's just a flag rename. I also deleted a comment. Here. There's no actual code in that comment. Hard for me to see why that would have done anything. We can always upgrade or downgrade to a previous version and make sure. Let's take out our breakpoints. This is not helping. This is really weird. This is really weird. Okay. I'm going to go back to copier, and instead of trying to use this number, wait, it's the same, 8800 again. What? Let's try it again. $8,800. Bro, all right. We're just going to do that. It's going to take a while. It's very weird why it came out different. Did I rename the flag everywhere? In theory, it wouldn't matter if I didn't, because the program would not compile, because this is a statically checked programming language. That's what git bisect was made for. Ho-de-do, we're just waiting for this to go. We're just waiting for this to go. This has been kind of a weirdly... I mean, you guys didn't see what all was happening this morning, but I had a similar thing going on where I was like, oh my God, it's crashing in a really weird way that it shouldn't be. In that case, it was because I had changed something significant and not just renamed a frickin' flag. And I was about to give up and revert, and then I was like, oh, wait. Something in the corner of my mind was like, oh, wait, I bet it's this. And it was that. Is there a reason I don't post compiler builds on GitHub? Yes, I don't want to. I mean, I'm not sure I can come up with a better reason than that. Is this still going? Still going. Did I finish up that shooter game? Yes. It was pretty okay. Like once I got past the painful part of the right mouse button not working, it was pretty okay. Still, it could easily be better with some basic changes. Is this even running? Or is it stuck in like com open or whatever? Nope, it's going. Oh my God, we're so far from getting there. Why did conditional breakpoints like get a lot slower recently in some secret patch? Because I don't remember it being this bad. We're like literally less than 1/3 of the way. You know what? Fuck it. This is stupid. Gee, how can you live without an IDE? It's such an amazing piece of software that does all these things for you. It's great. Okay, question is this the same? Quite possibly. So it's 4958. We'll see if that changes. Okay, here we go. 4958. So it's getting cleared out somewhere. Which is interesting. So now I'll try a data breakpoint. Why am I doing that? I think this is... I think this is really old code. Why didn't this crash us like weeks ago? What's going on? Okay. It's from not that long ago. Why did I do that? So what I was expecting is that I would have copied these declarations. Oh, and their scope points to the old thing. So I'm clearing it out. I don't know why I'm not setting it to the iterator block. That would make more sense. So wait, I'm copying these declarations. Because I'm copying I see. Because we're this is going to require a comment after it's all figured out. So we're setting this because we're just saying, hey, copy this. And when we copy this, it sets the enclosing scope of this thing to be whatever the enclosing scope is that we're copying of all these statements. That's not the right place. These live in the iterator block. However, we're not actually adding these things to the frickin' iterator block. Where does that happen? See, I have to remember this kind of thing for every frickin' thing in the parser, and it's a lot. And I just did this like a couple weeks ago on stream or whenever. So make iterator declarations. See, I'm just not understanding what is different now. Like, why is this? This doesn't have anything to do with anything that I've been doing. Why is it happening now? Regardless of whether this is correct or not. That's one problem. Is this fine or is it not fine? It's probably not fine. Except maybe it is, because we don't put them in the block right now. Why not? Make iterator declarations. I guess we don't. Why don't we call add statements? Okay. So I'm going to make a page of things to figure out and or comment. Why not calling add statement in make iterator declarations? That could be a totally fine decision. Like, clearly I was doing that at one point and then I decided not to. I need to verify that it doesn't happen later. And then comment why that's a good idea. So that's thing number one. Number two, see, this is weird. We're like setting and closing scope here, but not for the index decal like ever. Well, that seems broken. And then what's happening? Depend through import links. Follow constant import links. Did we not ever? Line 91. Wait, what? Okay. So this is a custom for loop. We're here. The bucket array for loop macro expansion. I did like change a dependency thing this morning. But I don't get, is it just no jobs versus yes jobs? Is that what we're talking about? No. Hold on, let's make a release compiler. Because that's crashing in a different place, but it may be old. Is there a release date on the next game? There isn't, I'm sad to say. All right, so that's working. So this could explain if there's different behavior with the debug build or if it's just no jobs. Like what? Okay. Debug build is behaving differently from release build. This concerns me. This is really weird because in principle, if we go no jobs, it should do the same thing in the same order. And so if it did depend through import links here, it should have done it there. So why do we not crash the same way in both? I don't know. Yeah, I wish we could make games much faster than we do. If I could get the infinity stones and snap my fingers, I would make games appear. But I've only got like 3 of the infinity stones at this point, and that's not enough to do that. So it is what it is. Any tips for writing good documentation? Good documentation is written by human beings who tell you the things you really need to know in order to use something. Don't go by example of what's out there because most documentation is pretty bad. Okay, so we've got this weird thing. Debug build is behaving differently from release build. Now, let's go back to before our cosmetic renaming. It might be that we had this bug here too, and I just didn't run the debug build in that way. Or, who knows? Like it could be a compiler bug, it could be my search and replace wasn't as non-impactful as I expected. Like usually if you just change the name of a variable, I mean, this isn't JavaScript, it should be fine. Okay. So, well, yes. Okay, so it still happens. Well, let's see. How far back do we go? I would expect not that far back. Oh, okay. This one is the time, I guess it was this afternoon, when I had a similar thing. I made a variable 64 bits, and then another variable that needed to track that was like 32. That was bad news. So we're going to go here, and we're going to go here. So we're backing out both of those. I'm not sure why that would cause a problem, but and then if we go further back before this, I'm not that surprised if it was caused back there. Interesting. I'm not sure why we're not getting build failure messages for this, but okay. Let's just find out where it happened. I'm gonna keep going. Oh God. It's fine. I see I skipped over this one. Anyway. We'll see, we're just gonna keep going. Opinion on using pointers to point to overflow buffers. What is an overflow buffer? What does that mean? Good documentation is written for someone who isn't you, which is why it's hard to write. It's not that hard. Look, written fiction is written for someone who isn't the author as well. And fiction writers mostly do fine. Okay. So back here, we are fine. Okay, I could see. So I just didn't notice for several revisions today. And I can see how that change would have masked a bug. I'm not sure why debug build and release build are behaving differently though. But I can see how that would do something. Okay. I'm less mystified. So now I want to go back to the current revision because we're just going to solve the problem. Because I believe now that the problem was already there. Question, though. Dude, someday I'm going to throw Emacs out the window. Okay, so we're making ident decal and index decal. So let's just look here. We're making links to those. We set the inferred type. We don't ever set the enclosing scope. Well, I mean, so I guess I'm free to do what I want to with this. And for now, I'm not going to do add statement, but I am going to set the enclosing scope consistently. All right. Is block what I think it is? Iterator block, yes. So make iterator declarations does this. And so then also in copier, and that's just going to remind me, if we keep this way, to comment it later. Now, that'll probably fix this particular crash, but I still don't really know. Like, I feel like deeper things are wrong. So there may be other problems. This has nothing to do with what I'm thinking about right now, but well, whatever. We'll look at that later. It just, every once in a while, I'm like, oh, I should try to cut down on the number of warnings in case any of them are actually important. Is there a particular aspect that I dislike of Breath of the Wild? No, just everything. Why, you know, is there anything that I like about it? Not really. Okay, so we're just gonna. Yeah, so now we're asserting somewhere totally different. Let's see what that is. You're going to need to hear a rant about that. No, I'm not going to bother. Look, it's whatever. It's not a good game, I don't think. But a lot of people like it. That's fine. Why am I asserting this? like it's set here. That doesn't make any sense. Like you might, I mean, you might be polymorphing. Here, what are we doing? We're copying a code directive. Now that's weird, though. Line 90. What? Oh, it must be implicitly created. Okay, yeah, this is a code directive that was created to point at this thing that's already totally resolved. So of course that loop control has a target statement. Although, see, this has to do with the thing that I did this morning about how ifs get evaluated, but I'm just not sure. Dude, I can't even type. All right, well, now we compile. So, let's run our very slow tests on everything, because apparently I wasn't doing this enough with the debug build today. Favorite game from this year? There's too much negativity in the chat today. From this year, what have I played this? It's always hard to remember things that I played even a few months ago. And then I'll be reminded of something and I'll be like, oh yeah, I should have mentioned that game to the person who asked me. I don't know. I don't think I added anything to my curation group this year. Let's see. Maybe I did. I put Baba as you this year. So that's pretty good. I mean, there's been lots of games that were good enough. Like the shooter game that I played, I had an okay time with. That was fine. I was talking about critical sections. If I want faster locks, should use SRW lock instead. Critical section is limited by backwards compatibility. It is a large struct with unnecessary members set to magic values. SRW lock is a pointer size struct. They both use the same algorithm. It's just an unfortunate historical thing. Okay. What is the OS compatibility on SRW lock? Like, what's the earliest support for it? I mean, the thing is, I don't tend to instantiate a lot of critical sections right now anyway, so it probably doesn't matter, but Vista and up, that's probably fine. Like, I don't think we're running on pre-Vista ever anything. Have I heard anything from Mark about Miyagakure? I have not. I want to drop him a line and do a workday again soon. But I haven't heard from him lately. He might be traveling again or something. Dude, you've linked me your critical section like 3 times. I know, man. All right, the tests are going. This is good. You know, I'm really tired today. I might just call that a win and just not try to do any more programming. Because, dude... I'm just worn out today. It's just where it's at. No, you know what? We need to at least do the memory allocation thing that I tried to do before this happened. It's simple. It's like literally not much. So we'll do that, and then that's a minimal victory. Fix a minor okay, trying one more time. Interp. Going to the pools. We're gonna go pool. What was it? Cube pool. Right. And then Emacs, I'm gonna frickin' throw you in the fireplace. I'm gonna put that in pipes. Just so it's easy to get inlined right here. Clean up when we get rid of force and first stuff we can remove this. Okay, and then we're gonna go memory is queued pool get without mutex size of queued, and then God, dude. You watched one of the past streams and was amazed by the quality at 6K BPS. Do you mean a gaming stream or a programming stream? Did I try 4Coder? Dude, I tried 4Coder and it just wasn't... Like, the thing that annoys me about Emacs is the broken, missing human factors that are so important. And that's exact... So I started at 4Coder and I was like, oh, this is going to be an editor that really cares about the user experience. Totally wasn't. Totally wasn't. So I don't see, like, okay. I don't know what 4Coder is for exactly. I guess because it's not like a minimal editor that does a good job at editing yet, because I started it on Windows. The text was like tiny and blurry because it didn't do, I mean, maybe he's fixed it by now, but it didn't do the, resolution scaling, annoying, stupid stuff that you shouldn't have to do that Microsoft makes you do to start a program now. And then it was impossible to figure out how to use just from using it. And like, if I have to program it to make it be what I want, I'll just program my own editor. Like, loading files isn't hard. Inserting and deleting characters from files isn't hard. So I don't exactly know who it's for right now. It's for C extensibility, sure, but I don't want to program in C. So anyway, I mean, maybe it's better now, but that was my experience when I tried it. You couldn't use it because of the blurriness. When did you try? Oh, it's still blurry and you tried it 3 days ago? Oh, yeah. See, like, what the hell? Like, that's the number one job of an editor, is to draw text on the screen, right? If it doesn't correctly draw text on the screen at a reasonable size, then I can't use it. Like, that's worse than Emacs deleting half my file all the time, because at least the other half of the file draws on the screen crisply at a correct size. You know what I mean? Did I try editors like Sublime Text? I'm just not interested in it. Those editors, when I see people using them and stuff, they're just like, Sublime Text is designed for a very different idea of what it means to edit code than what I have. I don't want shit popping up in front of my face all the time while I'm typing. That drives me nuts. It destroys focus and concentration. I just want a very clean, very simple thing that lets me effectively type text. Okay, so we compiled. We're just going to run all this stuff and debug again. It should work. Like, there's no reason why it wouldn't work. Well, there's reasons why it wouldn't work, for sure. But it already just didn't work. Seriously? Interesting. Maybe there's a thread problem. Oh God, you know what? I think parser is able to call this right now. That's a bummer. Yep. Yep. Okay. Speed Q for resolve gets called from various threads right now. so the allocator needs to synchronize. This is a bummer, and we would prefer not to have to do that. We also are going to want, we also go into a critical section for the put things in the pipe. So, yeah. What am I doing tonight? Apparently not very much. We've made very small improvements to things. But that's fine, because you know what? Some days that's how it is. It's Sunday night. I could have been eating popcorn and watching John Wick 5. And instead, I made some small improvements to the compiler. And that's forward progress. It's just what you do sometimes. Do I get recognized out there in the wild? I do sometimes. Not super frequently anymore, but sometimes. I sort of had the question about whether this needs to exist. Like, why? Why don't we just check? If it's polymorphic there. Wait, what? That's not right. Whoa! That's not right. What the hell? We're going to need to look that up. That is, I think this is very old. Okay, as soon as these tests are done running, I mean, we'll make the release compiler too. So this says, if there's a declaration at top level, like in a file or somewhere, and it's just assigned to a type, which is perfectly valid today, this comment might be from like 2015 or something. It just doesn't initialize it. Okay, so first let's make sure this runs game. We'll run, yeah, great. Okay, let's make a little test program. Look at all this stuff that's commented out. Okay. So we're going to say print the type is whatever the type, and we're going to say the type is, I don't know, E32. That's valid. That worked. Thanks for deleting half my file. Types are not currently valid in expression context. Like what? How? I mean, I think I should just be able to delete all this anyway. Because it should just be this anyway. Like, I think all of these are useless if statements. Because they just won't have a linear allocation. But like, why does this work anyway? I don't know. Okay, whatever. Anyway, let's check this other thing in that we just ran the tests for. We're going to say queues don't use the C++ default heap. That's great. Okay. I mean, I want to just delete all these lines of code right here because I like deleting code so much. But like, what? Why does this even work? If it's a declaration, wait, what? Okay, so first of all, this always, okay, we got to clean this up. This always returns true now. Every single return is true. So like this whole, are we done? That's not a thing. That said, I could imagine it being a thing at some point. Oh, I guess I put this, okay. I guess I put this in here. For future. For future's future. We're just gonna we're gonna see what happens. This actually should be type instantiation. So I'm not sure why we don't just return here. It's freaking me out. Okay, it's line 4. And we're going to say line 4. Can disable pop-ups in Sublime easily. You don't think it's justified to reject it just for that. It has some nice features like searching for function definitions across files. How is it going to know what a function definition is? Wait, what? Really? Wait, are we running the right thing? Okay, this is freaking me out, people. I need to give an argument of a file to process. That is what that is. Oh, we're running release build, everybody. I do that all the time. Okay, here we go. It knows because it has parsers for different languages. Doesn't have one for this language. Well, it has one for C++, but not for my actual programming language. Let's just see, what's the type? It's a literal. Wait, what? Oh, this is the wrong one. This is line 4 of some other file. Runtime support. Here we go. It's an ident. Okay, right. Yeah. So it passes through all these. So when I say expression type, it doesn't look up the substitution, which is another reason this is stupid. This is like all old code from like years ago that only barely made sense when it was put in and don't make any sense anymore. But that's good because it means we can just delete it all. So I'm pretty sure that literally all of this is meaningless from there to there. And this is the thing about, like, this made sense once upon a time when I was getting the compiler up and running. Like, all code bases have stuff like this, where if you didn't know what was going on and you came along and looked at this, you'd be like, oh, that looks really necessary to do all these things. It's like, no, it's probably not. And the only way that you know it's probably not is that you know deeply how the system is supposed to work. And that is the kind of knowledge that we are losing over time, right? It's the kind that lets you say, you know what, none of this matters. You can't do that on a system that you only barely understand at a surface level. So write one then. Well, if I'm going to do that, why don't I make my own editor, you know? Stop complaining about your... No, dude, I'm telling you why I don't use it. I'm telling you, like, it's not even a question of how much work or friction it would be to switch, because I'm not even considering switching to it, and I'm telling you why I'm not even considering switching to it. If you don't want to hear that, then go watch someone else's stream. All right, so there we go. It's like, the actual frustrating thing to me is how, and I've ranted about this before, it's how discussion always rat holes in this channel on editors and JavaScript. Like those are the two topics, like, and I'll say again, the more time that you spend talking about editors in JavaScript, the less time that you spend talking about things that are not those things and thinking about things that are not those things. And what you spend time and energy thinking about is very important, and has a large impact on where you end up. And that's actually also why I don't tend to answer these questions at great length or expend very much thought on them, because they're a tax, they're a constant tax on my ability to actually think about important things. So yeah, that's why I get annoyed at those discussions and why I don't really take them seriously and why I don't participate in them. I do spend a lot of time complaining about Emacs and Visual Studio. By percentage of streams, no, I don't. I literally said about 30 seconds worth of stuff about Emacs. The stream's been 2.5 hours. So no, but yet the discussion is constant editors and JavaScript. So whatever, man. Do I have any thoughts about memory tagging extensions? I don't know what that is, so you'd have to tell me. Do we have Vulkan bindings? I think we have a little bit. We don't have a full set. This ARM thing where the processor detects memory allocations that are invalid. Detects memory allocations that are in, what does that mean? I don't understand. I'll read the slides that you just linked. I don't know what it means to detect allocations that are invalid. Do you mean like reads and writes to memory that are outside of heap? Yeah, okay. No, they're just talking about standard stuff. Okay. I mean, it seems fine, whatever. That's stuff that you would normally implement in software. We haven't done our system for this language yet, so I'm not sure. Like, in order to really evaluate that, I'd have to have some system that we have and know why it's slow and see to what extent that those instructions could help. Because I don't have that system, I don't really know. That said, I mean, it doesn't seem that great looking through the slides, but I haven't really looked at them very carefully. what? I don't know, man. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure that there's a point. Do I ever get bugs caused by statements with side effects, changing the value of the arguments while a function is executing? We haven't had that problem yet. The plan for that is to have an optional debug flag that just checks after functions return. You know, so when you're going to call a function, if it's a debug build and you're passing something by reference like that, by ostensibly by const reference, you could just make a local copy because it's a debug build. You don't care that much about performance, and then just compare it against the local copy when you return, right? So that kind of bug would not be that hard to detect. So I'm not worried about it, but it's not something that's actually happened to us yet. Slide 15 is great. Oh, yeah, I don't know, man. I'm not sure. Why are these CPU instructions? Does it actually increase security in some way? That it's in hardware? Like I feel like the slides don't have all the information, and I would have to like listen to the talk that goes with the slides or something. Wait, probabilities of bug detection? What? Oh no. Yeah, this doesn't look that good. I don't think I would use this. But who knows? I would have to hear the talk to know for sure. Okay. So what even, now that we've been talking, I don't even remember, was that this build? I think it was. So let's just try deleting all this code and do a release build of everything. Okay. Yeah, as I suspected, none of those if statements did anything useful anymore, which is great. What keyboard layout am I QWERTY? Yeah. Mainly because of switching costs. In college, I remapped my keyboard to Dvorak, and I use that sometimes. But the problem is, as soon as you walk over to somebody else's computer where somebody else is logged in, you have to like switch how you're typing. And that sucks. All right. Remove a bunch of useless if statements. Okay, that was good. That was solid progress. All right, because I'm so annoyed and tired, I think I'm going to end the stream here. We'll pick it up maybe some other time, do some more things. There's just a bunch of little things that I want to do on my list. And yeah. Yeah, we'll see. What happens to a macro like this? M, X int expand. Print whatever comma X. If X is greater than 0, M, X minus 1. I think that'll work. Let's try it. See what happens. Yeah. Recursive macros only break when they hit stack limits. There is currently there's a hard-coded macro insertion limit right now, where if you get past a certain depth, like if I go 5,000, hopefully we'll hit that and not crash. Maybe not. We just crashed. Okay, well, that's a good test case then. I'm going to write down that we need to not crash there. Like I thought that I literally just the other day put in a new detection, because I rewrote the macro system since the demo actually, to be cleaner and better. But so some things had to be re-implemented a different way because the way it worked changed. And so I implemented nesting detection, but maybe I did it wrong, or maybe something else is wrong. How does the generated code look like? Well, what's the simplest way to do this? So I can't from the same workspace. I want to just call program print and print out the procedure, but I need to make a meta program. You know what? Let's do that. Because we're goofy. I need to make a template minimal. Okay. Starts. create workspace, intercept, and then oof, this is not legal. Whoops. We need to check that. Add build string not legal after intercept. So the thing is, because this is multi-threaded and stuff, as soon as you call this, you start getting messages, which means you might finish with messages before you see, or no, sorry, it's the other way around. Sorry. No, this is correct. Sorry, never mind. I was rambling. Cross that off the list. Okay, so we add a build file, right? Okay. And then so here we do this, and I'm just going to say print declaration for whatever, right? Okay. So we got to import compiler and basic. And identifier name, hello. All right. Attempt to call a compile time. Oh, right, because it's the meta program. Interesting. Oh. Wait, we never break from this loop, so why do we fin? Oh, we never do this. Ha ha. Okay. So we're just gonna break there. All right. So now we compile bar and we get all these declarations for all these frickin' things, most of which are Windows enums, because that's modern programming. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to call this something, we're going to call this recursive macro, right? Just to make it a really explicit name. Okay. If decal.name is recursive macro, then we print that, right? Whoops. It's not M anymore. Let's make it 5 again, just so we don't have a ridiculous program. Okay, so when we're building it, declaration for recursive macro. All right, great. This, we're getting 2 links because we're not telling it. Let's tell it. Hold on. We've got to tell it that this program is not generating an executable. So we do that. Whoops. Yeah. Wait. Oh, because this, okay, this also inherits our build options. And so it also has no executable unless we set build options on that workspace. But that's fine. Actually, we could just do that down here. After launching W, kind of dumb. All right. That's probably illegal, but whatever. Okay, so we could still run the program. Great. We didn't change, the name is bar meta because that's, we didn't change the default, so that's what we ran. All right, so the reason I wanted to do all this is I have this program print module that'll print out, oh, I actually don't know, it might not draw the expansion. It probably just draws the static. You know what, there was maybe no point in this. All right. Well, I actually don't know what we're going to print. What happened to the main? Oh. Yeah. I haven't tried to use this in a long time. All right, so these are a bunch of things. I don't know why it's got all these declarations. I thought I wasn't passing those messages in. Oh. We're saying receive message. So everybody that came in the message along with recursive macro. Can I just file declaration? Let's just do this. Now we have an empty. Okay, whatever. I thought it was going to be simple, and it's not. I don't know why. I need to go back and work on program print some more. Anyway, the answer is just, and the reason I said I don't even know what it's going to print is because, you know, as a user, you want to know about the if, but you also want to know what the substitution is for the if. And I think we just show the if. But what's going to happen is, I mean, you'll just end up with a bunch of print statements here. That's it. It's exactly what you would think. Whatever. That totally wasn't worth going on a 10-minute thing. Shouldn't you be printing something that actually calls that macro? We do call that macro. Oh, wait, yes, I see what you're saying. Yes, that's what we actually wanted to show is something that prints, that calls the macro. Good point. However, that doesn't really solve the problem that we're not printing anything anyway, right? Like I'm not sure what the problem is, and like we're just printing nothing for our program. I don't know why, and I haven't tried to use this in a long time, so it might just be broken. Oh, wait, we could just call print declaration. Yeah, we're not printing anything for some reason. It's probably just flagged imported or frickin' something. Or it's a header. I mean, I would need to step through this. But we should eventually get the bodies for these things. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. How about this nightmare? F $y $t y of 5. Okay, hold on. Before I try to decode what this does, let me just paste it. Okay. F y is of some type, y of 5. Let's you know what? Let's just get rid of all this old stuff so that we know what we're looking at. We'll comment that out. We'll put this up here. Okay, so instead of a macro, it's a function, right? Because it has no expand. So it's a function, it takes a constant and calls it, right? And so then we're calling that with a function that takes an int. Oh, it's a macro. I think I already did this. Like, I think I'm one step ahead of you. Demo macros 2. I think I tried this. First class macros. Hey, look, it's the same thing. This is in the next demo, but we'll put it here. Yeah, how many languages do you know that have first-class macros? Oh, and you're using the backtick Y. Okay, I get it. That's kind of hilarious. That's an extra spicy step. I don't know if that's going to work. Let's see. Let's make sure it's not an old executable. See? Subtly recursive anonymous macros, yeah. That's SRAM. That's what, when you see the acronym SRAM, when you're buying computers, it tells you how many subtly recursive anonymous macros that computer could run. Yeah, so this is cool. I mean, if I see someone write code like that, they might get fired, but it's cool. How does the compiler handle using continue in the body of a for loop over something like vector 4, which doesn't have an explicit for loop in its for expansion? I showed this in the demo. In the insert directive, you remap the continue to whatever you want it to be. So you would have to remap it to something in that vector 4 example, which was the really stupid, like do it for X, do it for Y, do it for Z, do it for W. Well, you probably wouldn't do anything for continue because continue just goes on to the next one. Oh, but you would have to... Yeah, see, you would have to be able to remap continue to something that would skip the rest of your own inserted code. And we don't have go-tos right now, so it couldn't be a go-to. So you would have to do a dummy loop anyway if you wanted to support break and continue from that. That's a really weird case, though. Maybe that's a reason why we add goto, though. You know what I'm saying? Would you consider streaming designing a puzzle for the Sokoban game? I've done that before. If you look back on Twitch, you might still be able to find some before they get deleted. We'll do more later, too. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with goto. It's just the main reason I haven't done it is it's just more annoying syntax. But like we'll probably add it at some point because it's a good question. Like for that kind of a thing, you basically need a goto or a stupid like loop that doesn't actually do anything. There just hasn't been a need for goto, yeah. Like, you know, I've got many, many small things to do. And sometimes they go fast, but sometimes they don't. Like tonight we had this weird problem that I was confused about. So that took a while. And, you know, why add more things if the current things aren't done? But I imagine that when we put it in beta, someone's going to really want goto for some reason. It's just what happens. Yeah, it might be more than 2 months since we actually did a puzzle design stream. In fact, I'm pretty sure it has been. So maybe all those are gone, but we'll do more. Yeah, goto is in principle not really different from like break or continue or whatever. The only slight difference is, you know, it has to be able to look later in the procedure for the label, but that's not, you know, that's not that big of a deal. There is also labeled break continue, which is some way more elegant way of breaking out of nested things. Good thing we have labeled break and continue in this language. Didn't Dijkstra trash on goto? Yeah, but you got to understand that was in a very different culture where people used goto all the time for many things. And it's like, yeah, that wasn't that great. But you know what? We mostly don't use it anymore, and that's fine. But sometimes you're just writing some code where you really need to go to. Not that often, but if you really need it and you can't do it, then that's really bad. If you add go-to, please don't do the annoying C++ version where you can't skip declarations. Yeah, that's not, that drives me nuts about C++, especially switch statements where now you have to put braces around all your switches. That's bananas. Because we don't have constructors and destructors, there's no real worry about anything like that. Like if you just skip initialization of something, then you just skipped initialization of something, and that's fine. GCC has a flag, mic model equals large, which has to be used if one wants to have a large global data more than 2 gigabytes. Do we have any limitation on the size of global data? Well, in principle, no. In practice, I haven't tried anything that big. Okay, wait. By large global data, do you mean... You obviously don't mean in the executable, right? You mean just runtime heap or something? No, we don't have a limit like that. I'm pretty sure the Sokoban game gets over 2 gigs on a regular basis. That's probably just old stuff in GCC's runtime libraries or something. Dijkstra was just at the right time in the right position. He didn't really discover anything groundbreaking. I mean, maybe that's true, but that's also how fields progress. Like, you've got to understand that most of what gets taught to that second year CS major who could discover Dijkstra's algorithm is based on the work of people like Dijkstra. So of course he could discover it, right? Like, it's just, yeah. Are zeroed globals in BSS or heap allocated at startup? Well, I mean, under no circumstance would they be heap allocated. No way. We do go through a lot of trouble to generate 2 global data segments, a segment, a BSS segment for data that's all 0, and a non-BSS segment for data that may be non-zero, right? My understanding is a lot of operating systems. So the cool thing about that is if you have a lot of data that's initialized to 0, then it shouldn't take up space in the executable, right? And then it gets created on launch. But I've heard a lot of OSs like actually don't do that anymore, and they just put it in the executable, which sucks. So I don't know, but we do it. We actually do that. Your professor was even against break continue. Well, that's someone who hasn't written a lot of real code. Sorry. The argument is go-to makes sense if you're trying to make your programs provable, but that's not really the goal of most programs. No, it's just hard to understand programs with a lot of go-tos. And it's easy to make mistakes, that's all. That's just factual. Very few people would argue with that. If you want to go somewhere, go to is the best way to get there. I think there are some limitations in COF format for section sizes. Maybe that's a GCC flag. Yeah, I'm still not sure about the question. Like, is it, was the question really about the global data segment? Because why would you want more than 2 gigabytes of global data segment? Like, why would you want your executable to be that freaking big? That's crazy. I mean, if it's BSS and it's not in the executable, if you're guaranteed that on that operating system, then I could see doing that. But like why not just heap allocate that at startup? Like, if you know you want a ginormous amount of memory, although to be fair, that's probably the minimum amount of memory required to run any Electron app. But if you need a ginormous amount of memory, why not just allocate that at startup? I don't know. What is my thought on restrict keyword in C99? I am not familiar enough with restrict to really say anything about it. I've never really used it, so I can't say anything. If it's in BSS, it doesn't go in the exe. I don't know. I read some statements that said sometimes it does, so I'm not sure what to think. You're just trying to figure out what the flag might be for. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, I would think that there's limits in the object file of like 4 gigs on the size of things, probably, right? Or is that not true? I mean, maybe that's been upgraded. Used to be true for sure. Yeah. I mean, all these object file formats are ancient, right? So, you know, back then 640K was enough for anyone. Dude, you can't even, forget displaying a web page. You can't even load a web page in 640K. Yeah. Well, that was fun. Congratulations to whoever in chat wrote these macros flawlessly in this language that you don't have the compiler for. First of all, following along closely enough to get all the frickin' dollar signs in the right place. Secondly, yeah, good job. I didn't have to fix anything. Hired, but then fired for writing this code in the first place. So it's a wash. The problem I saw is like that you have a bunch of big arrays like float A, M, N, which are M and N are constant compile time, and the total size is bigger than 2 gig, and GC fails to compile it and it complains. Oh, and they're initialized to some values. Yeah, I mean, at some point that stuff just shouldn't be in your executable, I guess. I don't know. I mean, it probably is better to have it there. But like, I would think that operating systems would be unhappy at loading images beyond a certain size. But I don't really know. Yeah, this gives me faith that people are actually watching the streams and paying attention to something besides JavaScript. So that's cool. That's cool. We can do some other stuff here. We could say, oh, no, because this, I was going to print the file and line number, but that'll be the same all the time because it'll just resolve to this one in the source file. I'm trying to just think of some way to make the expansion more visible, but maybe there isn't really one. It's not initialized even if it's 0 GCC complains. Oh, but I mean with the flag, right? Like if it's not initialized, then I really don't understand why it's in the executable, right? I don't know. Can you redefine return in 4 expansions like you can for break and continue? Yes. No, actually no, not right now. I mean, if we could add it if we had a good reason for it. It's just return is a much more of a gray area because you can return different values. It's not just a simple substitution. And it's not, return is not really about loop control. And because there aren't any destructors, it can't automatically make anything happen anyway, so it's not really something you have to worry about. That said, when I say you can't do it, that's just for the automatic remapper that I demoed last time. Next macro demo, we will show a way that you could replace a return with anything that you want. Actually, you can do that anyway already from your meta program. Last 2 weeks of your life have been dealing with Android Camera 2 API. It's horrid. Yeah, big companies are very good at making bad APIs. That's just a constant. Any info on when will the next macro demo be? I'm not sure. So, like there will be a demo before too long. It'll either be macro demo 2 or it'll be MISC features demo. We'll just see. It might be MISC features demo. I had expected to do a substantial amount of work on new macro stuff already, but I had decided instead to go rewrite the macro system to make it better. So that's what I did. All right, everybody. Thanks for coming by. We're going to end the stream now. I just put on my list, figure out why program print wasn't printing those procedures. Because that's a weird thing. Thanks for coming by, and we'll do some more soon. We'll do some more compiler improvement. Good night.